All right, we're back with CEO Money. This is Vince Rowe sitting for Michael Yorber this week. He is, again, out on assignment all week, and sweeping the bottom of the hour with us, as I mentioned in the last segment, is Keith Barthold. And Keith comes to us from DKBInnovative, and he's in the HIPAA space for a generalized introduction. And so I'll let him tell a little bit about himself, and then let's dive into some of the things that you guys are doing in the HIPAA compliance space. Can we do that?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Vince.
Yeah, glad you're here.
Yeah, so my company, DKBInnovative, we provide managed IT security and IT services, a lot of specialty in healthcare. Got about 15 years background working with HIPAA high tech and compliance, having worked with Tenet and done medical records transformation for about 60 hospitals and about 150
Let's talk
practices.
a little bit about your pedigree, because you got some big names on here that where you came from. Is it you were at Pro Systems for 10 years?
I was at Pro Systems.
Doing the same thing?
Into their executive program, absolutely. Working with Tenet that entire time, and then we were acquired by Dell. Continued to work there, but led a lot of their patient applications and of course, getting heavy into the initial stages of HIPAA high tech as we took Tenet from paper to electronic medical records.
Right. That's a huge leap. Is that we still see a lot of people, even now today, as all the high as the executive office in the United States, that some stuff is just on paper.
That's true. That's true.
And so there's still a long ways to go.
Right.
You know? So when you think about paper, it can be stolen, can be taken. And you think about the HIPAA environment where we're trying to get to take everything to a more secure environment. What are some of the things that you see that are innovations in your name that are coming about that are making it more secure?
Yeah, I think just the accessibility of medical records is something that has really changed healthcare. Now, having patient history, having those records is at the doctor's fingertips at all times. And it doesn't matter whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or halfway across the world. You can see that background. You have access to what you need for great patient care. Now, the challenge with that has become that a lot of physicians have found themselves doing more work managing IT than actual patient care. So it can be a huge distraction. And certainly with security, you don't have to watch the news very much to see or hear about the latest breach, right? The latest Fortune 500 company or small business or hospital that's been hit by a ransomware attack or is having some sort of cybersecurity challenge where those records are compromised.
When you think about it, is the history of me, let's talk about me for a minute, but history of me is that I was in the military for 10 years, and those records seem to be in a place that no one can get them. And so getting to those, and I had a couple surgeries while I was in, so I always was worried that if something cataclysmic happened to me, they wouldn't know about my prior surgeries. So are things being done to go back and data mine that stuff that may have happened earlier in my life, or anyone, let's say, that they're going to be able to have access to those records and bring them up to speed? Or is it this generation is going to have to, the baby boomers are going to have to rely on, somebody knowing what my medical history is?
Yeah, I think that's been the challenge for the past 10, 20 years is HIE, Health Information Exchange. Really, it's that integration between healthcare entities to make sure that those records are accessible and that they go from one place to the other, whether it just be an imaging center or some sort of diagnostic center or outpatient area to an inpatient hospital or to surgery. Having that trail and having that chronological order of your treatment, your care, and your tests, and having all of that accessible by the healthcare professionals, it's been a challenge because, let's face it, everyone has a different format. Everyone wants to be an owner of that record, and how do you get it from one place to another and get it done securely? It's a challenge.
Are there applications nowadays that speak cross-platforms? Because I know, just like everything, is that there's always that middleware that sits in there a lot of times that has been written for other than healthcare companies that sit in the middle that is out there that allows those systems to speak, or do they have to be built still?
Absolutely. There's a lot of standards in place. HL7 is one of those, which is standards that are in place to store that data in a certain format and transmit it in a certain format. continued challenges, though, just how to scale that and how to do that correctly. And I know one of the latest things is using blockchain technology, basically the way that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin work and how they maintain these giant registries of accounts. And it's not stored in one particular location. It's peer-to-peer. It's stored everywhere. Yeah. They're trying to do the same thing with healthcare data. I think it's a great idea. We've just got a long road ahead, making that work.
What are the barriers now? Where are we at in this entire process? Because I've heard about it for years.
Sure.
But what are the barriers? And you can do a little self-promotion here. Let's talk about where you guys fit to be able to help a company be able to do that.
Well, one of the barriers is clearly, HIPAA high-tech, maintaining compliance for that and not having someone in particular that has ownership of that record, like traditional records where you would have a covered entity, like if a hospital generated those records and stores those records, they're the custodian and they're responsible for it. You look at something like blockchain to where it's not stored in a particular area, it's a real challenge. How do we adapt the laws and how do we ensure that that information is protected and it's secured and who has accountability for that? The rules change when you go to something like blockchain, but what we're doing is really building out that compliance program and helping our clients, whether they're a provider of healthcare or whether they're serving the healthcare industry. Again, it may be a lab system or a payment processing group. We've got several different entities that serve healthcare that they have to work with those records, and they're under the same compliance regulation because they can often become the weakest link to the provider. So they have to have a robust culture of compliance, and cybersecurity works with that hand in hand.
I'm kind of going back to the first thing that you said because it just jumped out at me, and it was kind of interesting is that you started talking about everybody playing well together. Now, is this going to take legislation? Is it going to take intervention, or what's it going to take for everybody to get in the sandbox and play together well? Or there's going to be factions that say we don't want to do it that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know that we've had years of legislation attempting.
So
right?
So there is a pipeline of it, right?
There is. There's a lot going on in D.C. trying to bring that together, and then you've got states working together and working with the federal government as well. I think anytime you get the government involved, trying to bring together a giant industry like healthcare,
they can't see my face. I'm rolling my eyes. They can't see my face, but I can understand. And those are some of the barriers. So who deals with that stuff? I mean, so you guys are you guys up to speed on all those things and all the things that are coming down the pipeline as far as the legislation, state by state? Is it local or what?
Yeah, I mean, our focus is more on what are the laws that are affecting you. Obviously, what's coming down the pipeline, but more so, what does Health and Human Services want to see, and what do OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, who enforces.
That was optical character recognition back in my day.
So it's the enforcement agency.
Okay.
For HIPAA compliance, and the interesting thing about OCR is that for every dollar they spend on compliance enforcement, they get about a $5 return. I mean, how would you like a return on investment like that for your business, right?
Yeah.
So it brings to light, well, what's going to happen with enforcement in light of all of these challenges in cybersecurity and what the impact is on the economy when you have a government entity that is, got an 80% margins.
Talk about if they have teeth right after the break. Okay, we're going to go to the break here at the bottom of the hour. I'm talking to Keith Barthold. He's with DKBInnovative, and we're talking about HIPAA compliance, where that whole market is. As we go out to the break, I want to let you know the CEO Money with Vince Rowe this week, because Michael's out. This segment was brought to you by Rewards.com. If you want to know more about Rewards.com, you can go to www.rewardstoken.io. India Oscar. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Vince Rowe sitting in for Michael Yorba. We're here this week, all week long while Michael's out on assignment. And our guest in this or this last segment, and the continuing into this segment is Keith Barthold, and he is from DKBInnovative, and he is in the cybersecurity arena. We talked basically about HIPAA in the first segment, and this segment we're going to focus a little bit more on the cybersecurity and some of the things that are going in the cybersecurity arena and things that you might want to look at. But you, during the break, were telling me about some really interesting stats in the cybersecurity arena that when you hear these numbers, you think, I thought maybe I knew them, but it doesn't sound like I really did. So tell us a little bit about cybersecurity and what we may not know.
Yeah, Vince. So, it's pretty wild what the numbers look like. I think there's a bias out there that it will never happen to me, right? And a lot of small and medium-sized businesses are struggling, and they're working on building the business. Cybersecurity is kind of off to the side. But the fact is that 85% of those breaches that occur with businesses with less than 1,000 employees. The other staggering stat on that is the fact that, this year, here in 2018, 1 in 5 small to medium-sized businesses will be breached. Not vulnerabilities, they will actually be breached. And depending on the size of those, it can be staggering. And then, 97% of those breaches could have been avoided with technology that's already available.
So if I'm in a big company, I think about all those big companies that we hear about, right? And so I feel like maybe I'm more vulnerable than somebody in a small company. Is that a fair statement, or everyone is vulnerable?
It's not. Everyone's vulnerable. That's the thing is that, the larger companies, just like attacks on the bank. Imagine the number of major attacks with like a JP Morgan Chase that happen each day.
Right.
And that's what gets the headline news. Hackers know, though, that the low-lying fruit are the weak, the small practices.
But the yield is not as large there. Is that true?
It's not as large, correct. But you've got a lot larger playing field. It's all about volume. And things like ransomware, where ransomware is very easy to contract. You get some click-happy employees.
Yeah, and there's no chemo for it.
That's right. That's right. And they know that odds are, faced with a couple of weeks of downtime trying to restore your systems or paying a few $1,000s,
right, you're
probably going to pay a few $1,000s to attempt to restore your data versus being down, right? And that's what happened to a hospital in central Indiana earlier this year. Is when faced with a ransomware attack, they paid the $45,000, which is really kind of unusual, right?
Okay.
But they paid it, and the reason why they paid it is that their alternative was to restore the entire system from backups, and they found out that it would be 2 weeks of downtime before the hospital was able to open their doors.
So millions versus 45,000 in net effect.
Right. The thing that you don't see, though, is their total cost is estimated to be around $750,000 because of the cybersecurity professionals that had to come in, all of the PR damage that occurred, all of the cleanup, all of the fixing their systems to make sure that never happened again.
And a lot of those don't hit the news, it sounds like, because I don't think I heard about that. So these aren't things
Certainly not.
Yeah, so these are just things that do happen, just like general crimes that are not in the news all the time. Yeah?
Right. It's not a big company. It's a small hospital. You just don't see it on the headlines like you would Home Depot.
Okay, so now I got to know: so the mystery? Did they actually turn and give their data back? Did they?
Data was never captured. It was encrypted,
okay.
So there was no actual breach.
So they gave them the key back and say, "Here's your key to unlock all your."
They did. So they unlocked it for about $45,000. But like I said, much larger, $750,000 spent in total.
That's just crazy.
Yep.
That's just crazy. So if you're in a small company or a medium company, and some of the things that they need to be thinking of, why would they bring in a DKBInnovative to help them out? Obviously, you just said it. There's stuff on the market they could generally go get and maybe do themselves from their IT department. But what would they be missing that you would be offering?
Yeah, I think it's a lot about the tools and having a team of professionals. An entire team of experts to come in and understand where those vulnerabilities are, and what is the best solution, the most cost-effective solution to fix that vulnerability. Because you're not going to go at Fort Knox level. If you do, you'll spend every penny of your profits as a small business owner trying to plug all of the cybersecurity holes. That would be a huge mistake, right? The other mistake, though, is avoiding cybersecurity completely. So there's a real balance, and having professionals that understand cybersecurity and that understand compliance and what you're required to do at with the law, and then having that business acumen to find the appropriate balance. Those types of resources are what we have our team loaded with.
What's a team look like? What's a team that if let's say a medium-sized company come in, what does normally that team look like? What are they comprised of? One person, 6 people, different skill sets?
No, very different skill sets, right? 15, 20 people, on a given project. It's going to vary. We have a chief information security officer. We have people that are experts in audit and specifically going in and finding where the gaps are, and others that are solutionists in projects to go, okay, if these are the appropriate steps that need to be taken for this vulnerability, maybe it's something like multi-factor authentication to where you've got to get a notification on your phone in order to log into this application to reach this data. Other experts that are experts in implementing that specifically.
All right, so we got 1 minute. I want you to tell us how to get in contact with you.
Sure.
How to find out more about your company, and where can they, know everything about you. What website?
So we're here in Dallas. DKBInnovative is our website.
Okay.
Our sister website also is HIPAA We have a website HIPAA
Yeah.
We have a website
Easier to
dedicated
remember.
specifically to cybersecurity and compliance for the healthcare.
And HIPAA is HIPAA.
Correct.
And WALL.
Correct.
HIPAA
Yep.
wall.
Just like a firewall, we're there to protect you against compliance breaches.
Perfect. All right, Keith, thank you for coming aboard.
Thank you,
you for
Vince.
coming in studio with us today.